Hello students, this is Taranum Jahan and I'm here again with you all people to start up the new chapter that is from geography. So let's start with the new chapter from geography. So here agriculture. Agriculture is a chapter 4 of your NCRT, whereas agriculture plus major crops of India is a 5th and 6th chapter of your Viva education. Here it is given separately, whereas in NCRT, agriculture plus major crops of India has been discussed in the same chapter called agriculture. So let's begin with the chapter. The topics that we are covering under this chapter is the first we'll see the introduction of agriculture, then the farm system, then the types of farming. Under that we'll see the substantial farming and the commercial farming. Then we'll see the major crops. After the major crop we'll see the agricultural development. Then we'll see a farm in the land and a farm in USA. So before starting up the chapter, we should know the meaning of agriculture. Agriculture. This has the word which has derived from a Latin word called ager or agri, meaning field and culture. Overall, it means cultivation. Agriculture is also known as farming. It is an art and science of cultivating the soil, raising the crops, and rearing the livestock. The agriculture falls under the primary sector activity, and all the agriculture activities includes growing of crops, fruits, vegetables and flowers, and rearing of livestock. Now, how agriculture is done? Agriculture is one of the most important primary activity which has been conducted by the whole world. 50% of the person in the world are engaged in the agricultural activity. Two-thirds of the Indian population is completely dependent on the agriculture, as India has a land and the climatic condition favorable for carrying out agriculture activities. The land which can be used for cultivation and on which the crops are grown is known as arable land. Apart from the soil condition, different climatic factors that affects the cultivation of the crops in an area rainfall or precipitation, you can even call the rainfall as precipitation, temperature and light. Different crops require different climatic condition for the healthy growth. So what is arable land? I'll explain you in detail about this word, the word which has come in the middle, arable land. Now what kind of a land is called arable land? Now what is arable land? The right type of soil and climate are very important for any kind of the agricultural activity. The land on which the crops are grown is known as arable land. Geographically, if you see that the arable land in an agricultural term means that the land which can be used for growing crops. See, on the earth we are having 57.5 million square miles of land, that is approximately 7.65 million square miles are arable. So, however, arable land is currently being lost rapidly due to the deforestation. Now, the activities which are carried on by the people in order to do the agriculture. Agriculture is a primary activity which includes growing of crops, fruits, vegetables, flowers, and rearing of the livestock. And the transformation of a plant to the finished products involve three types of activities, which are known as the economic activities. They are the primary activity, secondary activity, and tertiary activity. Now, what are these primary activities? Primary activities are those activities which are connected with the extraction and the production of natural resources. For example, like agriculture, fishing, poultry farming, mining, these all includes the primary activities. Then comes your secondary activity. Secondary activities are concerned with the processing of natural resources to the manufacturing products like baking of bread, weaving of cloths, steel manufacturing, etc. These comes under the secondary activities. Then comes your tertiary activity. Tertiary activity provides services like transport, trade, banking, insurance, and advertisement. So, these are the three activities which are involved in making the plantation to the finished products. So, these are the three main economic activities which are carried by this agricultural, that is nothing but the agricultural activities. Now, as you all are familiar with the agriculture, that agriculture is nothing but the cultivation on the soil and growing the crops and rearing livestock. But apart from this, you are having the other form of cultivations like sericulture, pisciculture, viticulture, and horticulture. Now, what all these are? Sericulture. Sericulture is an art and science of rearing silk from the silkworm to produce the raw silk are involved into this cultivation of they cultivate the foods and the plants to feed the silkworm and the extraction of the raw silk yarn from the cocoons of the silkworms for processing and weaving. It comes from the Greek word called serikos. The word sericulture has comes out from the Greek word called serikos, meaning silk and culture. This means rearing. Then the next is pisciculture. Pisciculture is a science of breeding fish. It is specially designed ponds, tanks, or lakes. It is done purely for the commercial purpose. And it comes out from the Latin word called pisci, meaning fish, and culture. That is meaning cultivation. Then comes the next is viticulture. Viticulture is a science of study and production of grapes. This comes from the Latin word called vitis, means wine, and culture means cultivation. Then the next is horticulture. Horticulture is the science or art of cultivating fruits, vegetables, flowers, or ornamental plants. This comes from the Latin word called hortus, meaning garden, and culture means cultivation. This involves the activities that carried out to improve the crop yield and quality and nutritious value and the resistance to insects and diseases. So these are the other various form of the cultivation which has been carried out in the agricultural activities. Input work and output of farming system. Agriculture or a farming can be called a system. The farming system has three components, and these three components includes input, process, and output. Now what is input? Input includes seeds, fertilizers, machinery, and labor. Whereas the process is the processing activity like tilling, plowing, sowing, irrigating, weeding, and harvesting or breeding in cases of animals' forms by which the output is obtained. Now, what is output which has been obtained? Output is the end product, including crops, wool, dairy, and poultry products. Now with the help of this image, all the farm system will be very clear to you all people. See the input, process and output has been clearly explained in these images, and you will get to know that what are the inputs, what is the processing unit and what is the output unit in order to get the finished product. Now let's see the types of farming. Farming depends upon the geographical condition, demand of the produce, labor and the level of technology. Then only we can do the farming. There are two types of farming. That is, the first is subsistence farming and the next is commercial farming. So now let's see what is subsistence farming and commercial farming. So here With this flow chart, you will understand the types of farming. Then we'll discuss it in the separate side heading, each and everything in detail. So the first is farming. Farming is classified into two, that is subsistence farming and commercial farming. Subsistence farming is again classified into two, that is intensive subsistence and primitive subsistence. Then primitive subsistence is again classified into two, that is shifting cultivation and nomadic herding. Commercial farming is of three types, that is commercial grain farming, mixed farming and plantation. Now let's see each and everything what it is. Now the first is subsistence farming. Subsistence farming is carried out at a low scale for a small output. It is practiced to meet the needs of the farmer's family. This uses very low end technology and most of the labor is manual over here. And this can be further classified into intensive subsistence agriculture and primitive subsistence agriculture. Now let's see intensive subsistence agriculture. Intensive subsistence agriculture. This, the farmers use the simple tools such as spades and plow and manual labors to cultivate the small plot of land. And it is practiced in the areas having a fertile soil and receiving plenty of sunshine throughout the year. It is more common in the thickly populated areas in monsoon regions of South and Southeast and the East Asia. It is practiced in the tropical and subtropical areas of the West Bengal and Andhra Pradesh. Rice is the main crops grown through the intensive farming in addition to wheat, maize, pulses and oil seeds on the same plot of the land. This type of cultivation produces very little and is mainly to fulfill only the farmer's personal needs. Then comes your primitive subsistence agriculture. It includes shifting cultivation and nomadic herdings. So now let's see what is shifting cultivation. Shifting cultivation. Shifting cultivation is also known as slash and burn agriculture. It is where after the cultivation the land is abandoned and the cultivators they moves to the new plant. This was done earlier when these primitives, the tribal people they used to live. They used to select a plot of the land and they used to burn it, then cultivate it on that land and then leave it. Because after once the cultivation is done, the land becomes abandoned. So it is common in the areas where the rainfall is heavy. It is practiced in the dense forest areas of northeast Indian parts of the Southeast Asia, tropical Africa, and the Amazon basin. The crops grown here are maize, yam, potatoes, and cassava. With the help of this image, you will understand the shifting cultivation. They choose a new site whenever they just select a plot of a land. They choose a new site, then they slash whatever the trees that have been naturally grown over there. They slash those plants which are of no use. Then they burn whatever is left out, then abandon of old site after 2 or 3 years. After that they just leave in order to have the fertility of the soil, because the ashes which have been burnt over there will increase the fertility there. Then once the fertility has been gained, they start harvesting, then they cultivate. After that they just abandon this land and they move forward, because this land cannot be used again for the cultivation, because now it has been abandoned. So they just move and they select the new site again. Then the next is nomadic herding. Nomadic herding is where the herdmen move from place to place with their animals for fodders and water along the defined routes. It is practiced mainly in the semi-arid and the arid areas like Rajasthan, Jammu and Kashmir, Sahara, and Central Asia. Sheep, goats, camels, and yaks are reared, and they provide milk, meat, wool, and hide to the herdsmen. Commercial farming. Commercial farming includes the activities on the larger scale and yield a much larger produce. It requires minimum manual labor. The requirement of the minimum manual labor is very less under the commercial farming, whereas it involves the machines. The machines do the most of the work in the commercial farming. The crops that are grown and the animals that are reared under this are completely sold in the markets. Developed nations mostly perform this type of farming extensively. Commercial farming includes commercial grain farming, mixed farming, and plantation farming. Now let's see each one of them in detail. The first is commercial grain farming. The commercial grain farming is a cultivation of the crops for commercial purpose, where crops are grown for the sale in the markets. It is practiced in the sparsely populated areas of the temperate grassland of North America, Europe, and Asia. The main crops that are grown under the commercial grain farming is wheat and maize. Then the next type of farming is mixed farming. Mixed farming is done where the land is used for growing food for fodder crops and rearing livestock. It is common in Europe, parts of eastern USA, Argentina, Southeast Australia, and New Zealand and South Africa. Farmers cultivate food crops like rice, wheat, and fodder crops in order to feed their animals, the rearing animals like barley and grasses. So under this image you can see that how the mixed farming is done, where the two or more crops are grown simultaneously in a sequential cropping. See, the mixed cropping and the relay cropping has been done. They are also growing the maize and rice, wheat, whereas they are also growing the grasses and the fodder's food. So this is called as mixed cropping. It involves two or more crops growing at a time in the ground. Now let's see what are the advantages of growing the two or more crops simultaneously under the mixed cropping. They give the greatest stability to yield over different seasons. We can yield more crops than compared to the other farming system where according to the season we can grow more than one crops. Better use for the growth resource. Then it has a better control of weeds, pests and diseases. One crop may provide physical support to the another one. One crop provides shelter to the other crops. Erosion control through the providing continuous leaves covers over the ground surfaces, and it also benefits the small farmers of for the limited means. Then the last is plantation. Plantation is where the large farm or estate grows a single crop of a tea, coffee, sugarcane, cashews, rubber, banana, or cotton for the commercial use. They requires a large amount of labor and the capital investment in building the extensive transportation network. They need specific climatic condition. The produce from these plantations like tea leaves and the rubber latex are produced or processed in the market ready output, that is tea and rubber sheets. In common, it is tropical and subtropical regions of the world like India, Sri Lanka, Malaysia and Brazil. These are the countries which grows this type of a plantation, and it requires a huge processing process to in order to convert these tea leaves into the proper tea, and this rubber, whatever the rubber latex which has been provided by the tree, into a rubber sheets. So the processing is also involved. That is the reason why it also involves huge capital investment too. So it requires an extensive transportation network plus the huge markets in order to sell them. These are the different type of a plantation which is done under the plantation for the sugar cane, tea, rubber, coffee. So these are the plantation which are carried on. Now the next is major crops. Crops are plants that are grown and harvested for eating or selling. A variety of crops are grown to meet the requirement of the growing population. On the basis of the usage, the crops are classified into three types. Crops that are grown for a food like rice, wheat, millets, and maize. And they need a specific environment and the geographical condition to grow. And even the different crops are produced at the different places like rice, wheat, they require different weather conditions too. So let's see what are the crops that are the major crops that are grown overall the world. Let's see. The first major crop which have been produced is rice. Rice is the main food crop and it is staple diet in the tropical and the subtropical region. And I said you what is tropical region? The region which comes under the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn is called as tropical region, and the above the tropical part is called as subtropical one. The crops shows best yield with a high temperature. Wherever you are having a high temperature, these crops grows very rapidly in a high humidity and rainfall. Alluvial clayey soil is the best for growing these rices and it can retain water too. China is the leading producer of rice, followed by India, which together account for the half of the world total rice production. Japan, Sri Lanka, Egypt, and Bangladesh are the other major producer of the rice. Apart from them, in West Bengal and the Bangladesh, due to the favorable climatic condition, 2 to 3 more crops are grown in the year. Then the next major crop is wheat. Wheat requires a well-drained, loamy soil. It grows best in the moderate rainfall and a moderate temperature, and it requires loads and loads of sunshine in the harvest season. Bangladesh, West Bengal, and the prairies of the USA, Canada, Russia, Argentina, Australia, Ukraine, and Pakistan are the major producer of wheat. In India, wheat is sown in the winter season and they are harvested in the summer season. Next major crop is millets. Millets are known as the coarse grain. They are grown well on the soil of relatively low fertility or a sandy soil. It requires low to adequate rainfall and temperature ranging from high to moderate. In India, jawar, bajra, and ragi are grown. Other major producers of millets in the world are China, Niger, and Nigeria. Next major crop is maize. Maize is commonly referred to as a corns. They need well drained and a fertile soil to grow, and they requires moderate temperature, moderate rainfall, and abundance of sunshine. The major producer of maize in the world are North America, Brazil, China, Russia, Mexico, India, Canada, and South Africa. Now, these are the crops which are grown for the agro-based industries. And the agro-based industries grows jute and cotton. That is nothing but the fiber crops. So the first one is cotton. It is the main raw material for cotton textile industry and it requires the high temperatures, light rainfall and plenty of sunlight with 210 frost-free days. and it grows best on the black soil and alluvial soil. In India, cotton is mostly grown in the parts of Deccan plateaus. Apart from India, the leading producer of cotton in the world are China, USA, Pakistan, Brazil, and Egypt. This is the next fiber which is grown by the agro-based industry is jute. It is also known as the golden fiber. It is grown in the tropical areas. They required high temperature, plain alluvial soil and plenty of rainfall and a humid climate to grow. India and Bangladesh are the leading producer of jute. These are the beverage crops. The beverage crops are like tea and coffee. And the first beverage crop here is coffee. Coffee grows well in the well-drained loamy soil and hilly slopes. They need warm and wet climate like in a subtropical regions. Brazil is a world leader in the production of coffee, followed by Colombia and India. The next beverage crop is tea. Tea is grown in plantations. It requires cool and humid climate to grow with well distributed high rainfall, and it should be distributed throughout the year and well drained loamy soil. It grows on the slope to ensure that water does not dock or it does not clog on it. China, India, Kenya, and Sri Lanka are known to be the produce the finest tea in the world. Darjeeling tea is recognized by the consumer all over the world for its unique flavor and quality. Then the next is agricultural development. Now, what is agricultural development? Agricultural development refers to the efforts made to increase and improve the farm production in order to meet the growing demand of the increasing population. This includes better farming practices, better crops variety, and awareness of farmers. Farm production can be increased by improving the irrigation facilities, promoting the use of high quality fertilizer and high yield value seeds, increasing the farming areas, then increasing the number of crops grown on the farm in a year, mechanization, that is nothing but the use of machinery and equipment to perform various agricultural operations like plowing, irrigating, spraying, pesticides, and harvesting. The main aim of the agricultural development is to provide the food security for the growing world population. Agriculture has developed the world over. This development varies from place to place. The food security exists when all the people at all the times have a physical as well as the economic access to the sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and the food preference for a healthy and active life. And all these things have been taken into consideration by the development of the farming by our government. Now with this image, just see the differences between the farming, how the farming in India has been done and how the farming in the USA has been done. Now let's see the differences of both the farming system. Now let's see a farm in India. Intensive subsistence agriculture is practiced on a small farms in developing countries like India that have a large population. A typical Indian farmer they has a farmland of about 1.5 hectares. They buy high yield seeds from the market to grow at least two crops a year, which are usually a food crops like rice, wheat, and pulses. Then they operate on the low scale using traditional method for agricultural operations, and they rely on the indefinite and the temporary sources for the supply of essentials. They take advices of elders as well as the government agricultural officers regarding the farming practices. Intensive farming practices are easy to use as the size of the farmers are small and the labor is easily available. The new farming practice includes the using of tractors for plowing the fields which can either purchase or taken on rent. The main source of irrigation is a tube well near the field. Family members of the farmers help him in carrying out the farming activities. Some farmers also rear livestock like buffaloes and hens and sell the milk and eggs produced by these animals at the nearest available cooperative stores. The cooperative societies is a business owned and controlled equally by the people who use its services or who works at it. These cooperative societies they guide these members farmers in taking care of their livestock. So the agriculture cooperative society also along with the banks serve in leading funds to the farmers and to buy HYV seeds and farming implements. The farmer in India have to sell the produce themselves and since there is a shortage facilities they sometimes have to sell their food at a low prices. Now you have seen that how the farming in the India has been done with the help of the farmers by taking the help of the other cooperative members in order to look after their livestock or they even consulting the government in order to take the help. They are taking the different tractors or on the rent or then they are plowing on the field. So they are using the technical method of cultivating the crops and they are sowing at least one or two crops in a year. Now let's see what kind of a farming is done in USA. Farmers in the developed countries like the USA, Canada and Australia, they practice the commercial agriculture on the large farm. These farms are big ranging from 250 to 300 hectares in the size with their houses on the farm. Crops are grown at commercial level and they include wheat, maize or corn, soya bean, cotton, sugar beets, etc. So now the typical farmers in the USA, how they farm on their field. They operate on a much larger scale and is more like the businessmen's. Regularly analyzing the type of the soil and the water resources that are available and they decide which crops to be grown there. They take adequate steps to protect their crops from the pest by taking help of the fertilizer plants and enables him to choose the best pesticides. They have a computer linked to a satellite providing a complete picture of the field and as a result there is no need for supplementing farming income. They relies heavily on the machines like tractors, seeds drillers, levelers, combined harvesters and crushers. They has the advantages of the automated grain storage facilities and the dispatch facilities to the marketing agencies and so can wait for a good price for their farm produce. So these are the questions from your Viva Education and even this Viva Education covers a question from your NCRT. So do try to answer these questions from the given PPTs.